Good morning, everyone. Another beautiful day in Saint Lucia. Wonderful weather today. As I was coming in, I always sort of marvel at the weather and the beautiful sunshine in Saint Lucia. My name is Judy Deterville on the Mid-Morning Show. This is Holy Week as well, in not just in Saint Lucia, but in the world, in the Catholic world. And I have a very special guest with me in studio, His Grace Archbishop Robert Rivas. I'll introduce him in just a little while. Now, as you know, there have been so many messages going around on social media, and this is a lovely one that I came across, and I'd love to share it with you as well. Just something to reflect on. History repeats itself, and this was apparently a poem written in 1869 and was reprinted during the 1919 pandemic. So I'll read. This is timeless, and people stayed at home and read books, and listened, and they rested, and did exercises, and made art, and played, and learned new ways of being, and stopped and listened more deeply. Someone meditated, someone prayed, someone met their shadow, and people began to think differently, and people healed. And in the absence of people who lived in ignorant ways, dangerous, meaningless, and heartless, the earth also began to heal. And when the danger ended and people found themselves, they grieved for the dead and made new choices and dreamed of new visions and created new ways of living and completely healed the earth, just as they were healed. I love that. I'll read it again later toward the end of the program. I think the words themselves are timeless. The piece revealing a time in our history when people's lives were clearly disrupted in a similar way as they are today in our history. And history repeats itself. And it's a question I've asked myself as well in different circumstances, not as dire as these are today, but the question is, what have we learned from serious things that have happened in history? Have we learned the lesson? Perhaps another question that I've asked is, maybe if we don't know what the lesson is, then we can't learn it. And so perhaps that's why we keep on repeating what we shouldn't repeat. And so history repeats itself. And I guess I can throw it to the future and ask, in the next 100 years, what will they be dealing with? But I'll introduce my guest, Archbishop, His Grace Archbishop Robert Rivas. Your Grace, how are you?
I'm very well indeed.
It's a pleasure to have you in studio.
Yes.
I haven't had the privilege, and I'm saddened on the one hand that it's under these circumstances that I have the privilege, but I'm thrilled on the other hand to sit with you like this.
But I know who you are, and I have been told about you many times because we have had an eye on you to help us in the church in the process of our assembly that was due next month, and we have had to cancel it to a later date.
Right.
But where we needed to bring together some of our Catholic communicators in Saint Lucia to advise as in a consultancy situation where we can get some good advice from you for bringing the church into the digital milieu. Well, the thing is that COVID-19 has kind of pushed us there ahead of the plans we had.
Right.
But you know, what do you say? God's ways are not our ways.
This reminds me, Your Grace, of 2000. And in 2000, it was the Catholic Congress
Yes.
that we were rejoicing over.
Yes.
And 20 years later,
The Jubilee year. Yeah.
yes, this is where we are 20 years later.
Yeah.
So I just...
So on the one hand, we were rejoicing
Correct.
and celebrating,
Yes.
and now we find ourselves in the desert.
Exactly.
You know, what a contrast.
Yeah, indeed.
You know, but God speaks in the desert too.
Are we listening?
You know. Now the thing is, we need to know the questions. I once watched a show, a kung fu show, and I remember the person playing kung fu, the role in it was, he said, you know, it's better to know the questions than to have all the answers.
Wow, I like that.
You know, And it makes a lot of, because now we need to ask the right questions. We may not get all the solutions and all the answers, but we need to know how to ask the questions so that we can search. Because you see, life is guided by wisdom, and wisdom is a search for truth and meaning in life, you know. So I like that piece you just read there. You know, one of the things I like writing.
Yes.
Okay, and I'm a bit of a poet in my own way. You know, I do my own style of free verse.
Yes.
And for this, I found myself reflecting, because I feel that at this time we have to reflect.
Yes.
And reflect deeply on what is going on.
Correct.
And not keep it to ourselves, but to share it with others so that other people can be also encouraged to reflect, because we cannot just look at this situation we are in now with a virus that has literally stalled the world, brought everything to a standstill, where we are in quarantine or lockdown or stay home or whatever is the expression you want to use. The thing is that life has changed. Things are different. The thing is, do we say, oh, that is bad? Or do we even say, you know, good things are coming out of it? How are we analyzing? How are we reflecting on all this? I wrote a little piece. Would you like me to share it with you?
Please.
Yeah, and to share it with our listeners. And then at the end, I have another piece that if you would like me to, that one is my Easter piece. That but I could bring it in advance, you know, because good news need to be shared.
I agree.
Okay?
Please go ahead.
So I call this one, The World is Changing, It Seems. And it's a reflection. COVID-19 is a devastating pandemic, distancing us from each other. And yet, social distancing has helped to bring us closer to one another. The times have changed rapidly, and so has the global mentality. Day by day, we are learning to live as sisters and brothers in the company of the afflicted and the suffering. The world is changing, it seems. The pandemic has taken its toll, causing lockdowns and quarantine, with nations lamenting and people made to stay home. This is very hard for a civilization that does not know what home is like. We have found ourselves as strangers in a strange place. This is difficult to comprehend when the greatest good of all, the family, is at stake. Staying home is creating new consciousness, new values, and relationships. The world is changing, it seems. Don't be downcast. Be not afraid. This is a moment of grace, a time to avoid the rat race. Our impulse is to go out, to leave home, and to hang out. A little virus has slowed us down, caused us to ease up on going out, shopping and buying things, accumulating more and more. We need to take time to find ourselves in the jungle we have created, where competition made us enemies and suspicious of each other, greedy and wanting to be on top and ahead of the other. This lust for power made us unreal. Instead, indeed, staying home is very revealing. The world is changing, it seems. The horizons are changing. Peoples and nations are communicating. Peace is better than war. Being one's sisters and brothers' keeper is better than ignoring each other. Compassion and kindness are more wholesome than living selfishly. The crying earth and the crying poor are observing humanity in its dying and resurrecting. The tomb of despair and egoism has cracked wide open. Humanity is healing, craving, and caring. Holy Church herself is waking, walking tenderly by faith in the hope of new beginnings. What a great time for humility and restructuring. In weakness and vulnerability is strength. In every crisis, there is opportunity and a new advent. The world is changing, it seems. And this is the last verse. The greatest change must come from within. A lesson to learn from COVID-19. Now is the time to make the world a better place through walking by faith and greater caring and sharing. COVID-19 has had its sway. The next move is ours. Let's choose the best way. In a dramatically short space of time, the old world has passed away. Through our suffering and struggle, we are winning the battle in the dawning of a new day. The world has changed, it seems.
Very poignant. And we'll take a break. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Coronavirus? I am worried, Gassa. It's only old people dying from that.
Hold up. Being young does not mean being safe. Yes, it's true that the elderly are at higher risk, but anyone can get the virus. The effect is even worse if you have a chronic condition like hypertension, heart disease, lung disease, and diabetes, or weakness in your immune system. If you are living with these conditions, be extra careful. Wash your hands with soap and water. Use hand sanitizer with at least 60% alcohol when hand washing is not possible. Avoid touching your face. Take steps to boost your immunity through proper nutrition, exercise, rest, and take your medication as prescribed. Limit being around people who have flu symptoms, even close family members.
Our health is in our hands. Together, through simple actions, we can stop the spread of coronavirus. This message was brought to you by the Bureau of Health Education of the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
Welcome back. This is the COVID-19, the response on GIS NTN. My name is Judy Deterville. If you're just joining us, my in-studio guest, His Grace Archbishop Robert Rivas. And you missed a beautiful reflection if you've tuned in, if you were not with us within the last 5 minutes. I was able to pull out a few sentences that really jumped out at me, Your Grace.
Yeah.
But to start with, something you said that reminded me of a line in a song, "Day by day we grow a little closer." So I wrote that down just as a reminder.
Yes.
And so while we're growing closer on one hand, but we're further apart on the other hand. That just sort of, riveted in my mind. And that a civilization that does not know what home is like. Talk about that a little bit more.
Well, this was part of the crisis of COVID, that suddenly people had to stay home and they had to learn to live with each other. When the natural thing was to get away. You know, home was a place that you go and you stay and you sleep and that, but you left to go to work, you left to go to school, you left to go with your friends, you left to go to the mall, you always all the time leaving home, you know. And the concept of home as a place for nurturing family, for nurturing values, for the education and upbringing of children, and for interrelationships, that gift of exchange between couples and in relationships within families and all that, and also home within the neighborhood, and how homes around each other support each other and connect with each other.
But do you think we're getting that deeper message though, still?
Well, I may say, if you're not getting it, I'm trying to help you to get it.
Yes.
And one of the things that you know, I enjoyed watching the BBC News was the people in Italy, in these, you know, whole communities that are shut down, locked down, unlocked down, you know, where they're opening their windows and they are singing to each other across the streets. And also that those who are young and more vibrant are remembering the elderly and singing for the elderly and reaching out to the elderly, bringing food gifts to them. And then in Spain, they're doing a similar thing.
Correct.
And then we have all these samples of people stopping, like in Britain, they stopped and everybody came out in front of their homes and they kind of applauded and kind of empowered and energized all the health workers and that. I mean, so these are positive values that we are inventing if we didn't have them before. And certainly we are rediscovering family values, and I think, you know, this is a time to be grateful.
You said your line was that the family is at stake and that the world is changing.
Yes, yes.
And we're living through that change.
But you heard my last line, the world has changed.
Yes.
You know, you know, so like I'm coming down, the world is changing, but in the end,
it actually
you know,
has.
The reality is it has changed. And, you know, there are kind of misgivings out there in cyberspace too, and about COVID-19, you know. Is it something that we can have greater control of? Is it being manipulated, you know, for kind of for selfish gains and all this, you know? The thing is that it has happened and it has impacted the world, and we have found ourselves in a crisis. And the thing is, crisis for me is opportunity.
Yes,
you know,
indeed.
Crisis is not death, but it's an opportunity to rise from the ashes to new life.
But your line, humanity is dying and resurrecting.
Yes,
That's
yes,
exactly
yeah,
the thought.
yeah, yes. But it's not just humanity is dying and resurrecting, but the poor and the earth, the crying poor and the crying earth are watching humanity in its dying and resurrecting. In other words, they have their expectations too. You, in your little poem that you read, you know, you spoke about the earth healing.
Correct.
When we heal, the earth heals.
Yes, indeed.
And when the earth heals, we heal because we get the best from Mother Earth,
Yes.
which is our home.
Yes. Our very livelihood.
Yes, yeah.
I like that. I like that. Okay, Your Grace. So I had some specific questions I wanted to look at as well. For example, and you've sort of dealt with the themes in your reflection, but specifically, how is the clergy coping with this new normal? Because it really is a new normal for the members of the clergy.
Yeah. Well, I would say we are trying to be as creative as we can be in this, as you say, the new normal. We have found ourselves almost in a place that can throw us into insecurity, because, you know, our security is, you know, serving and living with our people and being there for others. And suddenly, on lockdown, you can't move, or if you can move, we have all been given passes so that we can do what you call minimum emergency pastoral ministry. Like somebody is dying, the priest can go and visit and bring viaticum, anoint the dying, anoint the sick, you know, take communion to the sick in their homes. But this is limited ministry, you know. But at least that gives us a little sense that we can go out and care and do something. We would like to do more. So what we have done is that we have become virtual priests and a digital bishop.
Right.
So that we are using the means, the social means of communications now, to reach our people, to maintain the connection, so that people don't feel abandoned,
Correct.
that they don't know what's going on, that they don't know what's happening in the church, they're not seeing the bishop's face, they're not hearing from their clergy. On last Friday, we have established now for the Archdiocese a Zoom platform. So now last Friday we had our first meeting, and it went very well.
Okay.
And you know, the first question I asked the priest was, you know, how is your work going? No, I said, how are you? How are you doing?
Yes.
And you know, because I wanted genuinely to get from them a response at the level of feelings,
Right.
you know. Because sometimes, you know, we are very good at mastering the art of, you know, kind of
Hiding.
everything is fine,
Yeah.
but you know, you won't get to
Yeah.
me unless I trust you enough to do so.
Yeah.
But you know, but in this time, we need to know a little bit more about each
deeper.
other, just because if we don't do that, somebody could be in need and we wouldn't know.
About it.
So I encourage that. We dealt with Holy Week and Easter and how we would manage this situation. And it was very clear that we will not have our churches open in time for Easter this year. So we have to live Easter in a new way.
Your Grace, let's take a break on that thought. We'll
Yeah.
come back and discuss this a bit further.
Yeah.
You're watching the COVID-19 response on NTN GIS Studios. My guest, His Grace Archbishop Robert Rivas. We'll be right back after the break.
Yeah. I hope I'm answering.
Coronavirus? But children are safe, no?
Hold up. Children are actually more likely to touch all kinds of surfaces, put their hands on their mouths and their eyes, or sneeze and cough with little thought about hygiene when around others. While children have been seen to recover well from this virus, they can easily spread it to those more at risk, like the elderly or ill persons who have a weaker immune system. Teach the little ones in your care to be little powerhouses of infection prevention. Keep reminding them, wash your hands. Cover your mouth with tissue or your inner elbow when you sneeze and cough. And be sure to praise them when you see them taking these precautions.
Our health is in our hands. Together, through simple actions, we can stop the spread of coronavirus. This message was brought to you by the Bureau of Health Education of the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
Welcome back. We're in studio with His Grace Archbishop Robert Rivas, and time is just flying by today. I don't know what's going on. So I'll just go right back to Your Grace.
Yes.
And I wanted to ask you, we were talking earlier about, you mentioned the priestly functions
Yes.
of keeping in touch with the people.
Yeah,
And so in the event of a funeral now, what would happen?
Yeah, well, you know, we had a press release and we outlined a protocol for the church right now. We have to observe what the state has stipulated.
Yes.
And so we can't have more than 10 people.
Correct.
Okay, so we have asked that near family, you know, the closest of the family will be the ones to be there for a funeral.
Okay.
You know, in some parts of the world, I think in Ireland right now, only the priest does the rite, and then the remains are taken away from the church.
Wow, I understand how that can happen as well. I've been through it with limited people in church.
Yes, yes.
The issue now is, though, that they can't even sit close to each other.
No, and they will also
church.
have to keep their social distance.
yeah.
So like mourning and grieving and all this is in a new place right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Your Grace, I'd like to have you read your reflection. You have another reflection to share with us.
Yeah.
Because time is just going,
It's
time is being stolen from us. I don't know why.
It's going so quickly.
So
But I'll
please,
tell
if
you
you
one
may.
thing. You asked me about Holy Week. And
Yes, I
like
did.
also what we were doing, and maybe I can give you quickly a
Yes,
little
please.
rundown.
Yes.
I wrote 3 words. I said Holy Thursday. You know, they're the 3 big days: Holy Thursday, Good Friday, Holy Saturday, Easter. Okay? So the Holy Thursday is a day for giving. That's how I describe it. And giving means Eucharist, thanksgiving, giving of self, the washing of the feet, priesthood, self-offering, leadership by example. Then Good Friday is the day for dying, and it is the day for self-emptying, humility, powerlessness, and self-sacrifice. Jesus dies on the cross for us. And Easter is a day for living, and the resurrection, the victory of life over death, light over darkness. And Jesus is our Passover, and he is risen and alive. So that's how we are going to celebrate the Triduum. But the Pope, in his message for Holy Week, said for the church and for the whole world, he said, in the silence of our cities, the Easter gospel will resound. And we know what our cities are like. People say it's a ghost town.
Yes.
It's empty.
Yes.
The biggest cities in the world,
Has
Madrid
stopped.
and Manila and all these places have stopped. New York. Everything is stopped. But the Pope said that in the silence of our cities, the Easter gospel will resound. And this is hope. Hope of resurrection. And this is why he says, it is the hope of a better time in which we can be better, finally freed from evil and from its pandemic. It is a hope. Hope does not disappoint. It is not an illusion. It is a hope.
Wow.
And that is, I want my listeners to hear that word, hope. And that Easter is going to be hope for us. The risen Lord is alive and with us, and he's not going to let us down in the midst of this pandemic. So I have also written a poem. It's called The Dawning of a New Day. And I would like to offer this as a reflection of as we come closer towards Easter.
Please.
Thank God I woke up this morning with the sun shining brightly through my window. The darkness of fear was no longer there as I looked boldly ahead to tomorrow. Today has already changed the future, and yesterday is gone forever. This is a time for rethinking and recreating, for the world we knew is in the crucible. The world has put off all its feasting. We have gone through our Lent. It is in its daily confrontation with death and dying. Nations declare a pestilential catastrophe to be warded off in sackcloth and ashes, stringent measures. World leaders are all advocating staying home and mandated social distancing. Our distance apart has healed empty hearts that are now closer in caring and sharing. The time we are in is providential, a kairos moment in all its dimensions. In a unique transformation of culture, we find ourselves strangers no longer. Home now counts for more than ever as a new place of interpersonal encounter. The nightmare we have been through will terminate, but generation after generation will recall it as a tale of epic proportions that left a trail of suffering and disaster in many nations. No place was spared the pandemic, suddenly unleashed with terror upon it. Humanity was trapped without immunity or security and vulnerably stretched to its limits. And this is the final verse. Now, a new day is beginning. This is our Easter. A new day is beginning, full of courage and hope, with faith overcoming the dread of the dark. From the lessons we have learnt, we can make a fresh start in rebuilding our world on values that will last. With humility and care, we can make our way there. With the advent of a dawning new day.
His Grace, Archbishop Robert Rivas. Beautiful words there. And I want to just pull out giving, dying, living, and hope.
Hope. Those
Your
are the
Grace.
words. Those are that's the Paschal mystery. Passion, death, and resurrection.
Thank you, Your Grace. Thank you very much for sharing with us.
Yes.
I hope you managed to find time to listen with us. I know it's busy. You think you're busy, but then you have time. You're at home, a time for reflection,
Yes.
a time for listening, a time for learning and growing. Your Grace, thank you very much for spending time with us today. We appreciate it. And it's just, again, saddens me that we've had to come together under these circumstances. However, the timing at Easter is absolutely perfect for this message.
Yes.
So final words from you.
Take care of each other. Don't abandon each other. And right now, don't get too worried about too many things. Learn to do with little and be simple. And remember, even out of what you have enough to share. Share and give, as Jesus did. If he didn't, we wouldn't have any Eucharist. We wouldn't have the chance to be giving thanks to God. But we have everything. God has blessed us. So right now, take care. This is Holy Week. Spend more time in prayer than worrying. And just fill your life with God. And let God be your rock, your refuge, your helper, your salvation. Let Jesus be your Lord and Savior to raise you up from the tomb, from the ashes, from the dungeon to new hope. Amen.
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 I don't want to be the final voice after this amen, but I must wrap up. This is Judy Deterville. You've been listening, watching Your Grace, His Grace, Archbishop Robert Rivas, from the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church in Saint Lucia, representing the clergy here, who have been distanced but have been brought closer together because of COVID-19, the response. I have to say goodbye. I'd love to sit chatting with Your Grace for the rest of the day, but perhaps another time. He may come back if we have time.
You just ask me and I will come.
Thank you, Your Grace. And so in the meantime, you're at home, a fresh time for rejuvenation from the inside. Think, reflect, and have hope. That's it for our show for today. Join us again tomorrow. We have Archdeacon Christian Glasgow with us, representing the Anglican faith. Have a good day.